Is data a blessing or a curse? Brought to you by Adastra, this is a must-listen podcast that inspires and advises people who are serious about digitalization.
Hello, and welcome to this Adastra podcast. My name is Mark Cahoot, and I lead the governance practice at Adastra North America, a data and AI consultancy powered by the cloud. I'm delighted to be joined today in our Toronto studio by Sam Wong, Senior Director of Data and AI for the Mark Anthony Group. Sam's a veteran data executive who loves to educate, speak, and lecture for university students to share the latest and greatest ideas at the bleeding edge of data and AI. If you don't know the name Mark Anthony Group, or MAG for short, MAG's an entrepreneurial producer of beverages, which has pioneered new industry categories with iconic brands like White Claw Hard Seltzer, Mike's Hard Lemonade, and most recently, Mas Plus by Messi, a next-generation hydration drink in partnership with football legend Lionel Messi. Now, the Mark Anthony Group has gotten here through a spirit of relentless innovation, taking the company from a one-person wine import business into an international drinks company with a portfolio of luxury wineries and iconic beverage brands. We've asked Sam to join us to talk about a particular part of MAG's growth trajectory that started when MAG's executive leadership recognized the transformational value of data and AI with incubation and smart experimentation. And Sam himself has been at the forefront of it all, so we have the benefit of your actual lived experience. So Sam, welcome, and please tell us a little bit about the approach that you adopted for driving growth through the deployment of data and AI. It'd be great to get a sense of what you were looking to achieve and a bit about how you got there.
Well, thanks, Mark, for the invite, and happy to share some of the lessons learned and journey. At the forefront, you want to make sure that when we talk about data and AI, we don't always just focus on the technology stack and the tools and the platforms, but really around what are we trying to solve? What business outcomes are we trying to drive? What value are we trying to deliver for our business stakeholders? And I think that is what really was the center of the innovation. It wasn't just to explore technology for the sake of exploring technology, but how could that power us to innovate and look for opportunities to improve what we have going at Mark Anthony.
So really linking the business and technology thinking by the sounds of it.
And really, having a space to really explore the possibilities, but also being able to deliver value.
Right on. Very interesting. Okay, well, let's think about where this started, the genesis, maybe some of the vision and the leadership behind it. What gave MAG, in fact, the confidence to take this leap and invest in AI early with an incubation program?
So it actually started, discussions with our CEO and CIO around, what could we do? Can we do something to answer this explosion of AI into the forefront? And I had offered the opportunity to say, hey, what if we had an incubator program where we allow a safe space to explore not only the technology, but how the technology can enable the business, and do it in a way you're not forcing a timeline, a deadline. And sometimes we get caught up in that. We have to deliver something by a certain date with a certain value. And so this allowed us to experiment, but also drive the use case that we wanted to use AI and data to resolve. And I think having that clear understanding of, hey, what is a strategic benefit if we did this, whether it was revenue growth, productivity, improved customer experience, this allowed us to get into building a specific AI and data and AI use case into a state of test, a state of pilot as well.
Right on. So very much thinking about strategic benefits and strategy drivers by the sound of it. And so you set up an incubation program. Let's talk about, now, incubators are a world of R&D, right? Kind of thing. The ability to take risks, the license to fail fast, as they say.
Or learn fast is what I like to use.
Okay, so a different perspective on it. The learning thing, it's not it's really figuring out as you go along. But there's always a gulf between R&D, incubation, and productionization. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the program that you set up. Tell me, what does it take to actually mobilize a program like that?
Well, in hindsight, what it allowed, like as we went through the program, we actually developed kind of 5 components of a framework that allowed us to kind of set up this AI incubator program and run it successfully. And we wanted to establish a program. We want to have an intake and curation process. And then we got to go and build it. Let's execute. But we also want to identify what are some of the lessons we can learn so we can improve what we've built. And we also want to demonstrate and market. And sometimes we, as some of us are Canadians, we may be a little bit humble and not want to brag about our accomplishments. But it's not about ego. It's about inspiring what is possible. And I've found that when you showcase what you've done, it triggers more ideation and inspiration as well.
I guess that is the spirit of innovation in and of itself. You can either add new energy or new insights, right? A new perspective of looking at things. So if you come from one example that you've built, it might inspire something else with your people. So in fact, you're driving strategic thinking that way, you might say. From your experience, what does a successful AI incubator look like? What are the hallmarks of it? And what aspects should leaders be careful not to overlook? What might not come to mind when you're embarking upon an R&D experimentation path?
I think sometimes you can get caught up in, I just want to have fun and just innovate and just play with tech. And I think sometimes you need to establish a mission statement. What is the purpose of this incubator? Right. So establish that up front allows clarity of what your goals and objectives are. So, and it's always helpful to have that kind of mission or vision statement. But tying into that is sponsorship. And I think we were lucky to have executive sponsorship to go ahead and proceed and actually align with one country executive right off the bat to say, okay, give space for your team to work together and let's identify what are some of the pressing things that require potentially data and AI to help solve. And so not forcing, hey, here's some technology. How can we use that technology here? What are the most pressing things? And can data and AI actually help address that?
Let me just riff on that for 1 second. So it sounds like you're talking about the people dimension a great deal, right? We're really stepping a little bit far back from technology as the primary driver for this, and really identifying an evangelist who can, at the top, at a senior level, who can mobilize the organization as well. It sounds like a very important component of this.
And really, on the people side, it's actually more important is not the technologist. It's actually your business sponsor. Like who's going to help drive that this implementation will actually lead to value and craft what it takes to make it real. And I think that the most successful initiatives that we took had the strongest partnership collaboration,
right,
and allowed us to journey together. And I feel that that's an underrated part of innovation is the collaboration. So just through the journey, sometimes you think this is what you're trying to solve. I'm trying to solve this with this, and during that journey, every initiative we've gone through has actually pivoted naturally, organically, and through experimentation, iteration, feedback. And we've changed how that product was evolving into something that was actually ready for implementation. It's because we allowed space to experiment, listen, test, and even find out, we can't go that route because there was a blocker, but it opened another door to go a different direction.
As I'm listening to, I have an image in my head of a business partner and a technology partner journeying together, fellow travelers, in fact, on this, really, again, making the point that the two sides have to work together. It ain't just a technology focus by the sounds of it. I'm just wondering, are there other people in the ecosystem, vendors, et cetera, that played a role in this? Was it really all your resources, Mag's resources, or are there other things that you can leverage out there that help you along?
You remember the whole kick when people were hiring data scientists for the sake of it? They just say, "Oh, I need a data scientist. I'm just
the unicorns, right?
Exactly.
The detective, the quants guru,
and they wanted the people before they actually had the business problem to solve. And I think we were careful not to do that. And I think organizations, especially of mid-market sizes, where you may not have a bench of resources sitting around that you can draw upon, we had to be very pragmatic. And so we were very fortunate to have a very strong vendor ecosystem.
Right.
And we were able to tie into that. And I think our brand helps, right? Obviously, people recognize the products that we make, and I think that allowed us to gain sponsorship with vendors, gain access to resources, or even early tech before it was released to actually help with that journey. And I feel organizations should explore your vendor ecosystem as opposed to treating them as like, hey, I need this, just give me this. And when you partner that way, you actually have access to way more intellectual resources and people maybe have just a little further ahead of you that you can also learn from and shape you a lot faster. So I feel that that's a no-brainer in any innovation program, is to leverage your ecosystem, because as much as you may think you're a smart guy or gal, you have to rely on, there's probably someone who's done it better, faster already. And you want to leverage those learnings. In the same way, you can share that with others that are maybe behind you as well.
And besides the thought leadership, perhaps opportunities of funding and so on as well, I would think.
For sure.
So I'm thinking now about a backlog of AI activities, visioning, ideating, coming up with use cases that you're going to do. When you're evaluating new use cases or opportunities to transform the business, what are you looking for?
I mean, sometimes you're forced to, not in this case, but sometimes, you may have to rely on the loudest voice. But where you don't have that constraint, you kind of want to look at this matrix grid of business value and effort, right? So if you can identify something that has a maximum impact or high impact to creating business value or alignment to the strategic goals of an organization, and it has low effort to get going, I mean, that's your sweet spot.
Right.
Ideally, that's what you look for, but then it branches out. You're going to have to play off between is it more important for the value or time to market? And you're going to have to balance a couple of those things, as well as just the resources to partner on. And I mentioned how it's important to have a business sponsor to work with you in that journey. And sometimes their bandwidth is a constraint.
Yes.
Right. And sometimes it's happened where you have to kind of pause a little bit because, they have other priorities that kick in that, to run the business. Right. And so you have to give that space and you have to learn to pivot. And I think that flexibility is part of why not having a forced deadline allows that space, or else there's that urgency and maybe you're going to cut corners and you just want to get a product out for getting the product out. And I think if you treat it as such that you want it to naturally organically grow, it will be more successful for sure.
Understood. I'm curious, did as you were evaluating AI opportunities, did you have to look a great deal into your data management and data readiness?
Oh, absolutely. I think, now some folks oversimplify, hey, bad garbage in, bad garbage out, and AI is only good as the data. And yes, those things are true, but I think there's also different levels of that. I don't think you should wait for perfection before you get into it, right? And so I feel folks are waiting for, I want AI to be absolutely perfect and bulletproof before I even get involved. Well, if that was the case, would you ever use a search engine to go find information? Do you trust a Wikipedia? Do you trust your Google or Bing search to be 100% giving you the right information, right? So part of that is there's still judgment, there's still curation.
Yeah.
But it also exposes gaps that you want to correct. And I did a talk once about how AI projects can actually kickstart your data management journey, right? When you talk about data management, buzzwords like data quality and governance and master data, a lot of that gets like, oh, that's just big words and it's not really sexy, right?
Acronyms, jargon, etc.
But this actually helps us trigger buy-in to say, hey, you want this to be better? Well, guess what? You're going to have to take ownership of your data. You're going to have ways to make sure it's a better quality. And what does that mean? How do we define it? How do we use it? How do we cleanse it? All those good stuff about data management gets highlighted because, hey, AI exposes the data in a new way that you never thought possible, where you probably didn't care how you manage some of your data, whether it's structured or unstructured data.
Yep.
And I think if you look at that as a journey as well, that your AI initiatives and your data initiatives are a journey, it's a program and not a project, then you allow for growth, iteration, improvement, and treat it like a product. You really can do more, and it's going to naturally evolve as your use cases continue to grow.
To your point, we've been at over the last year or so, various conferences around North America on AI and AI governance. And guess what? You show up there, and all of a sudden, no one actually wants to talk about AI governance, but everyone's talking about data governance, right? Because AI seems to, in fact, be the biggest driver for data management programs. When I'm talking to a client about data governance and data management programs, I always start from the starting point that no one wants to do. And to your point about acronyms, about jargon, about the nitty gritty, what's missing there often is the reason why. And AI seems to have provided the biggest burning platform these days for data governance, program data management activities, data management investment. So I think it's interesting to think about what AI also does for your data infrastructure and your data management capabilities. Let's get out of the fun world of experimentation and then into the serious, governed, gated world of production, of actually embedding AI and its inputs into your business processes and operations. So it's pretty much sort of common knowledge or common wisdom that most AI projects fail, right? I'm curious, how was your batting average by taking this incubation approach? Was it better or worse than most? And were you able to take some of your incubator projects into production? And what did it take to get that final push over the finish line?
So, we're in baseball season and obviously World Series, in Toronto being in the thick of it. My batting average was very high. And the reason is not because of anything me and my team did, right? It's really about, part of it is the collaboration, how you work together.
Yeah.
Part of it is also learning to pivot, right? And knowing that everything you do is going to feed something else. So maybe it started this way, but it actually led to a new initiative out of that actually triggered to something to production. But I think the other thing too is we were very conscious that we weren't just building something and build tech debt and building it and roll it out and figure it out later.
Once and done.
We were very conscious about some of the components, and maybe because I'm part of certain councils and committees around privacy and enterprise architecture, and so those things were already in the forefront of, as we're building these things, let's keep those groups involved so they're understanding what we're doing. Are there other guardrails we need to put in place with our infrastructure groups, with our enterprise architecture groups and things like that? So I think that allowed us to deploy a lot quicker because we were already part of that ecosystem of review. But at the end of the day, the success of a pilot to go into implementation is actually that pilot phase. Let's test it out. Let's see it in action with a smaller cohort that have a safe space to give feedback around what works, what doesn't work, what generates excitement.
Yes.
And I feel that excitement actually triggers, folks hearing about, hey, you guys are doing this, and they want to get involved and they have inputs and ideas. And I feel like if you can remove the ego that says everything has to come from you, you got to figure it all out, and you don't listen, and ideas can come from everywhere. I think that allows you to be more successful and allow you to pivot, allow you to get buy-in, allow you to incorporate some of that feedback in the solution so that you have a higher adoption rate as well.
It sounds like you are working actually with a multidisciplinary team in that sense, so that you'd get your ethical considerations in, your governance considerations, your privacy considerations by design almost as you were approaching this. So that's why it's always great to talk to practitioners, right? Because I think you found an accelerator for doing that rather than a very waterfally approach of putting in the appropriate governance. You did it as you went.
I think it helped that I had oversight over multiple data pillars. So I saw how everything is connected. And sometimes incubators can be very siloed and you're very short-sighted in even the technology that you're using, and you're figuring, well, guess what? A lot of the tech you're using doesn't meet certain governance standards for whatever reason, right? And so I think being conscious of all those things and how all the different data pillars work together, whether it's AI and data engineering or data management, right? A lot of things come together, and there's so much synergy. And I think it also allows you to say, hey, if I fix this, this will make this go easier. So guess what? I'm going to trigger that work somewhere else that allows this part to be successful. So it's a little bit of chess too, but it helps to think bigger than just your immediate focus of that incubator build that you're doing.
Takeaway from that: don't lock your incubator, your jet propulsion labs, your skunk works away in the basement in a Faraday cage, but make sure they're dealing with all of your constraint, opportunity, business providers, right? From compliance to the business. Again, it seems like this is the least siloed and the least hived off incubator I've ever heard of, which is very, very cool. Working again actually in the ecosystem. Let's talk about paying for this all. Most companies, as you mentioned, can't afford a dedicated bench to do R&D. How do you manage resource utilization in this? For example, what was the operating model? Were you very factory model in terms of a centralized way of delivering AI use cases? Or was there a lot of involvement from the business? Did they step into this a lot?
It was different depending on what the actual use case was and what we were building. And some of it was lighter touch with technology and was more about enabling and a lot more feedback with either business stakeholders or users that were going to be involved. Now, how we handle some of the work we do with our stakeholders is because we support a group of companies.
Yeah.
We have that balance between a federated model of support as well as blended with a centralized model to be able to scale. So we would have to make sure that let's call it our customer facing leaders and resources, they deal and they sit with those stakeholders. They understand their business, they understand their data better. And where we have more of the factory side is more of the engineering, right? So whether it's AI and ML engineering or data engineering or analytics engineering or data management engineering, you would then scale up as the use case demands that. And so that allows you to have more flex to move up and down. It protects you from, being bottlenecked with, I don't have enough resourcing, where I only have one engineer dedicated to that team, and that person's doing three things. Well, we have now means to actually scale up and scale down, long as we have a good balance of notice. Like I use the analogy of, let's say you're a home builder and you have multiple projects going on in different parts of the city. Are you going to need a plumber all the time? Are you going to need an electrician all the time and have them on standby for you? That's going to be very expensive, right? But you have a dedicated maybe architect and a foreman that's going to coordinate a lot of the work that's going to come in and when they need them, right? So that balance. So that's how we kind of run our data and AI team, is that kind of mix of federation and centralization, as well as enable our business stakeholders to do more where they can as well.
Right. And so you're really focusing the business stakeholders on what they know, what the data means, what the use case is meant to achieve, what the results look like. So really bringing the subject matter expertise to the table, if you will, for curation. Interesting. Sam, this has been quite an interesting walk along the AI journey. Just before we close, if you could give other business leaders one piece of advice on getting started with Gen AI, what would you tell your former self? What would you tell them? What would it be?
I think when Gen AI first really exploded a couple of years ago, I guess now, there was always, and even now with this whole sentiment of AI is replacing jobs, I think there is a natural fear that introducing AI into your business workflow, into your ecosystem, automatically equals I'm losing my job. So why do I would want to get involved in that? I want to protect my job. I want to protect my space. And I think right off the bat we were very conscious when we were doing some of these initiatives with sponsors was the intent of this was not to do that. It's to supercharge, give them more powers,
yes,
more capabilities. And I think that we started there from a change management perspective. And that actually helped because it got more involvement, more engagement, because they didn't see it as a threat. And then it wasn't, when we weren't saying that just to, do a bait and switch. It was actually very genuine. And that's how I believe is like AI is here to enable and allow us to do other things that are more value, that there's more value for the person to do. And I use this term called augmented intelligence to kind of illustrate the combination of AI and people working together and working better together as opposed to one or the other. And I think if you have that mindset and you're trying to articulate that and see it as an enabler and manage the change of that, I think you'll have more success in anything you do in terms of not just incubation, but also implementation.
Right. So we're sketching out the opportunity much more so than the potential threats that may come along. But let's think about those business leaders, just to close us off, who might be reticent to jump in experiment because they don't see where the value is going to come from, where the business impacts are going to say. How do you convince them to get on board?
Well, sometimes it's just having time with them and workshopping, and it's not starting with the tech, not even starting with the data. It's just like, hey, let's talk about your biggest pains. What are your biggest or opportunities? And you start with that and you start deconstructing what are you trying to solve? And then when you show them that this is what data practices and capabilities and AI capabilities can do to meet that and lead to this kind of ROI, then it changes the game. It's not just a technology project, or it's just a check mark for a CIO or a CEO to say, we are AI enabled or we are in the AI game, but it's actually tied to delivering value or strategic value. And I think I've done workshops where I've helped, business leaders think that way, and actually got them to think about how to prioritize what we want to go after. And then that led into, the solutioning part. Because honestly, the solutioning part is probably in a sense, the easier part.
Yes.
It's actually figuring out what are you trying to solve and agree that that's what is important for us to solve.
Sam, it's been a fascinating chat. Thank you very much. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining me and wishing you continued success. Really interesting to hear about how a mid-market company is able to successfully spur its growth through data and AI directly from the perspective of someone who's done it. So thank you for joining us today. And to our audience, thank you for joining this Adastra podcast. If you've found this interesting, stay tuned for more insights on data and analytics, and like and subscribe. Thank you.